Biden removes Trump's tariffs, then the prices of importing goods from China that you buy, for example, through Amazon.com will go down a little bit. So you can get cheaper products and more sales on Amazon.com. Coincidentally, the Washington Post has been also pushing this idea that we should get rid of Trump's tariffs. I think that's a coincidence, though.
Coincidence because Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post.
Yes.
Just in case that wasn't common knowledge, which I don't think it is. It's really disturbing how many billionaires own our media. Jeff Bezos owns Washington Post. Carlos Slim, Mexican billionaire, owns the New York Times. Michael Bloomberg owns Bloomberg.
Hey, well, if inflation continues the way it's going, pretty soon there's going to be billionaires, owning this show because we'll all have billions of dollars.
I don't think we're going to get to that level. But
yeah, that's we will be eating each other.
Zimbabwe levels of inflation.
Yeah, that is, you must weigh your money like when you pay for things because it's not worth counting it anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it is a political score. Like they will try to remove some of the tariffs because they want to be seen as doing something about inflation. Now, the U.S. Trade Representative, Catherine Tai, has come out saying that it's not really going to help.
Yeah. But Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, who was totally wrong about inflation, who said it would be, transitory, nothing, just totally wrong. She seems very supportive of the idea of removing tariffs.
Can I talk about Janet Yellen for a minute?
Oh, no. Matt's going to go on a rant about the Fed.
Are you saying he's going to be Yellen?
Oh, ooh.
See, look.
I don't know if you like that or didn't like that.
I know. I think I was of two minds.
So Janet Yellen is the Treasury Secretary.
Hold on, he's getting the soapbox out. Get on it.
Look, she was chair of the Federal Reserve from 2014 to 2018. You don't become chair of the Federal Reserve unless you understand better than almost anyone how the money system works, right? Like really works. She was also a board member during the quantitative easing period that came after the 2008 financial crisis. So she understands better than almost anyone how inflation works, what the relationship is between bailouts and interest rates and inflationary pressures, whether it's asset inflation or consumer price inflation.
I'm all about that asset inflation.
Right. Well, I mean,
you and Wall Street.
Yeah.
Right. So asset inflation is when things like stocks, real estate, other things go up. Also now like crypto and NFTs and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about.
Yeah. So we're seeing not just consumer price inflation, which is at 9% or something, but we're seeing asset inflation of those other things. Obviously, there's been recently a big dip, but those are going to go back up because if they dip too much, the Fed will bail them out again. So this is the whole thing. She understands how it works. And she understands how too much money gets created through the banking system. And so for her to say that oops, I didn't see inflation coming is either she's totally unqualified for the position she has and had before, or she's being disingenuous.
I wonder which one it is.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's very hard to say.
Really?
No, it's not hard to say. I just didn't want to say it, Shelley.
She's lying.
She's a smart woman. She's a very, very smart woman.
I'm a little disappointed. I really was expecting almost an Alex Jones level rant.
I think Matt was very tightly controlling himself.
I was toning it down.
Why?
Because do people really want to hear about the Fed and how
they want to see your emotion displayed?
Anyway.
Look, the
Matt is uncomfortable with emotion, so let's move on.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. the Fed screwed up. The Trump administration and the Biden administration both screwed up by essentially putting pressure onto too much deficit spending during the pandemic.
The COVID pandemic relief.
Yeah,
bills
Trump had a ton of deficit spending in his last year. Biden not only picked that up, but added new stuff to deficit spending.
Well, because the lesson that they learned from the Trump administration doing deficit spending was that hey, it didn't blow up the economy. We can push this even harder.
Like we wrote.
And thank goodness for Joe Manchin killing the Build Back Better bill, because imagine how much worse things would be.
And he killed it because he was worried about inflation.
Yeah.
And at the time, people were like, "Oh, that's stupid."
Yeah, there's no such thing as inflation.
Well, not no
Right.
such thing, but
I mean, there are people who believe that like the government can essentially print as much money as they want, and it doesn't lead to inflation.
yeah.
Like that's
Is that
wrong.
is that modern monetary
Modern
theory?
monetary theory, yeah. But it's wrong. So it's just flat out wrong. It doesn't mean that there aren't certain true elements within things, right? Like, 'cause it's obviously more complicated than that. And anyway, it's also more complicated to say the Fed prints money because they don't actually print money, and they don't actually just issue money either, right? And even the Fed's buying of deficit it's more complicated than that because it's actually the banks themselves, which are
Yeah. Well,
and
you said it pretty well the other day that like it is purposefully complicated so the average American doesn't understand what's happening.
Well, I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
also complicated because that's how the system is set up, but nobody's
Right.
trying to explain it to people.
Well, yeah. I mean, the banking system is like when you kind of get into how banks operate and like how they make loans, like it's so absurd that like you have to just like okay, like banks don't make loans based on how much money they have in the bank. They make it based on the interest rate from the Fed because they can borrow as much money from the Fed as they need to cover for the loans they're making. So they make however many loans that they can make that they think are good investments. And they just borrow the money at cheap interest rates because the Fed keeps them really cheap. But the impact of doing all those loans is to add all this money into the economy. And so that's what we've been seeing. And so that's like things that create inflationary pressure. And if that's a little bit confusing, it's meant to be confusing. It's meant to be confusing because if we all understood how it worked, we'd be like, this is like not okay.
Well, it's because it's totally removed from how like normal people function with money, where it's like you have so much money and like you can't just like magically spend $10 million you don't have.
Right. But a bank can loan out $10 million it doesn't have.
Yeah.
Because it can make a loan at, say, 4%, and it can borrow money from the Fed to cover
At
a lower percentage.
So the point is removing trade tariffs with China is not going to address the fundamental issues of inflation.
Thank you, Chris, for bringing us back on the rails.
That's what the show is all about.